When we say someone's cool, we think of like the Fonz, on that old show. We mean someone who is unaffected by the world. On the other hand, what does it mean to be a nerd?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it seems to me what we mean by someone who's a nerd is that, at least in regards to some area of life, some aspect, some thing, some phenomenon, they are decidedly not cool. In other words, they are very affected by it. They have allowed themselves, like, this is so cool. This thing is so interesting.
3, 2, 1. Welcome to Love Machine.
Welcome to another Nerding Out with That Nerdy Catholic. I am, as always, Seth Payne, That Nerdy Catholic. This week, we have a guest that I get to see every single day. Well, every work day.
That's generous. Get to. I appreciate that.
So today we're talking to JonMarc Grodi. He is a good friend of mine, but he's also my boss, and I get to see him every day at our office. And, well, I was about to say something about him, but why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Me? Well, yes. So JonMarc Grodi. I'm talking here, right?
Yes.
I'm here? Yes.
Yes.
I am the Chief Operating Officer of the Coming Home Network International, which is a Catholic apostolate helping people become Catholic and networking those who have done so, like people like Seth.
Mm-hmm.
And so we work together there at the Coming Home Network. My father started that apostolate, and so that's what we do. I'm married with 5 kids, live in Perrysburg, Ohio. I'm a student of philosophy, somewhat academically. I'm still working on my master's. By working, I mean I haven't finished it. Seth bugs me about it once in a while. Working hard or hardly working. That's definitely me. But more important to me is that I've just, for a long time, I've just been one who, like Seth, is likes to study and learn, to try to answer my own conundrums and questions in life and figure out what I'm doing. And so that's the reason I got into philosophy. It's also the reason I've been hardly working at it, because I've been too busy with kids
philosophizing.
And the active on the ground philosophizing. So yeah.
To start off, I just wanted to share just a short story of how JonMarc and I met. We both went to this Catholic New Media Conference in Boston a number of years ago. That was 8 or 9 years ago. I can't remember now.
Man,
we were both there. It was a day-long conference. We didn't meet each other. And there were maybe 3 or 4 people. Yeah, I think both of us, that was the first one we went to. There were 3 or 4 people that came up to me and they said, well, there's this guy here you should meet. He works for this organization. You're a convert. He works with this organization that works with converts. You should meet him. But I didn't get a chance. Yeah. But 2 or 3 days later, you sent me an email and you said, I just want to introduce myself. There are 3 or 4 people that told you on that day, there's this guy here who's a convert and you should meet him. Yeah. So we didn't meet that day. We started emailing. And then, I don't know, I think it might have been, that was in the spring. And a few months later, I was driving out to Illinois with my family to go spend some time with my in-laws. And you said, well, you're driving out west. We're in Steubenville. Why don't you stop over and, spend a night and we can hang out? And so I told my wife, it's like, well, can we take a little detour, go down to Steubenville and spend the night with this family? And she looked at me, she's like, but you haven't met them yet, have you? I'm like, no. And you want to spend the night at their house? Yeah.
What if they're weird?
What if they're crazy?
We were weird. We are
weird.
And continue to be weird.
And I said, why not? We've been emailing, that he works for a Catholic apostolate, so he has to be at least okay. Right.
Because nothing ever weird or awful happens.
Crazy. So we did, and that started it. And then the next Catholic New Media Conference we went to in Atlanta, right before that, you said, you sent an email to a few people, said, hey, just so you know, we're opening up this position at the Coming Home Network for a media and web person, and send this on to whoever you think is interested. And about 15 minutes later, I wrote back and I said, I'm interested.
That's my passive aggressive way of like I've done that before with positions. Been like, hey, share this with anybody who might be interested. Maybe you're interested.
And it worked.
Yeah.
So, so we've been working together for about 5.5 years. And I think it's been great so far.
Yeah.
And I think just better things to come.
Mm-hmm.
But today, we're going to be talking a little bit about who you are, about yourself, and then why you got into philosophy. So start off, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm not much, but as Brother Rex says, I'm all I think about. So, about myself. So I gave the brief intro, but in regards to this, where would you? Give me an angle to start in on this by. Yeah.
One of the interesting things about JonMarc is not just himself, but who he is related to. No, that's not the most important thing
work on that
or interesting thing about him. But you are the son of Marcus Grodi, who is in the right circles, you could say, a pretty famous convert. One of the things that my wife always says about Catholic speakers is that they are very famous in very small circles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and so he is a convert. He was a pastor, but he now hosts the Journey Home. But you grew up. He became Catholic when you were small. So what was that like, growing up with someone who was a convert and then eventually became someone who was a speaker and host of a television show all about converts?
Yeah, sure. So my dad was a Presbyterian pastor up until I was about 5, and so I didn't know much of what was going on at that point in his life. I just knew he was a pastor, and we had this cute little church community, and we sang Bible school songs, and he would preach. And I don't have tons of images at that time, but I have some. I do remember just the community and me being basically contented with life. And then it stopped. And I don't have an image of this, but Dad tells about having to get down on his knees and explain to me that he wasn't going to be a pastor anymore. He was going to be preaching, and I apparently cried. I don't remember what I was thinking or feeling, but that life was coming to an end. And why did it come to an end? Well, he was wrestling primarily with lots of things, but primarily with this issue of authority as a Presbyterian Bible preacher, and his authority to be speaking authoritatively on important issues of Christian doctrine and belief. When someone would ask him in the hospital, Jerry, my husband is dying. Is he going to go to heaven? What does he say to that person? He can give the standard Presbyterian lines on that, but of course, knowing that right down the street are Lutherans and Methodists and Baptists and other people, that might give a very different line, but they would all claim to be speaking from the same scripture verses in the same Bible. Mm-hmm. And just that wore on him over time. And it was partially a doctrinal issue, but it was more of kind of a personal discernment issue of, Lord, if I can't know that I'm where I should be, doing what I ought to be doing, speaking what is true, then I really don't have business being here. And so that led eventually to him not necessarily leaving the Presbyterian pastorate to become Catholic, but leaving it because he didn't feel he had the authority to teach. And so he left. We actually went to get back into engineering for a while. And then, his kind of spiritual, intellectual journey, that portion of it sort of completed. He became convinced of the Catholic faith and entered the faith. So I was about 5. So I grew up. We had moved to Steubenville, Ohio. He got connected to the Franciscan University, mm-hmm. And I grew up hearing him tell his story. Being exposed to the sort of people he was talking to. He was kind of developing a circle as he met other people, other pastors in particular, who'd made the same journey, and he was starting a network around them. I grew up around people. So I grew up around a certain group of people, these mm-hmm. Protestant pastors and lay people who loved Jesus, who had sparked this intellectual journey of mm-hmm. asking the question of, is this the church that Christ started? Is there more that he intends for me, that he calls mm-hmm. me to? And then becoming convinced of the truth of Catholicism, and so becoming home to the Catholic Church. And so within the church being this kind of person who, again, comes with all the evangelical Protestant gifts that the Holy Spirit has worked, love for the Bible, love for testimony, sharing your story, being excited about a personal relationship with Christ, but in the context of the Catholic Church with all the rest of the good stuff, with the sacraments, with all that. And so I grew up hearing their stories and their witness and their conversations with other people. And that was really impactful for me, all of that. In terms of being famous in small circles, my dad, within the Catholic world, he was invited to do the Journey Home program on EWTN, which has been running now for about 25 years. A very popular show, and it was just normal for us. But I think the more important piece of it was just that I was very blessed to just meet and hear the stories of so many interesting, cool people. Many names that the audience would recognize: Scott Hans and Jeff Cavins. And Curtis Martin is my youngest brother's godfather of Focus. He's a pretty popular speaker. So
I think the thing that's interesting about his journey is that I think it's easy for a lot of people who don't know much about the Christian faith to think of it just as something that you accept.
Yeah.
And that you go to church, you accept what they tell you, you don't really think about it, and you say, okay, Jesus loves me, I accept that. This is what I'm supposed to do, I accept that. But you don't put a lot of thought into it. And the journey that your father made, and that many converts especially from the Protestant world into the Catholic Church, have in common, is that they spend a lot of time thinking about it. And reading about it.
Yeah.
That there's a lot of intellectual journeying that they take. Maybe they grew up in a tradition where they didn't give a lot of thought to what they believed and why they believed it.
Right.
But especially if someone comes from a very anti-Catholic background, they need to wrestle and think through a lot of things before they are willing to take that step.
That's really interesting. Yeah, that gets me. I mean, this is a tangent of stuff to come later, but just thinking about the similarity between a sort of closed down fundamentalist type Christian or Catholic Christian, someone who just accepts point blank the stuff that's given to them and holds on to it and refuses to really think through it. And so too with sort of the new atheists and secular mindsets of our modern world that, again, just accept the philosophical and theological assumptions that they're just absorbed from the TV shows they watch and the headlines they read. They don't question them, and I think anyone else who does question them is an idiot. Whereas, I developed a lot of great friendships in college with atheists and agnostics and pagans and non-Catholic Christians. Whenever I met someone else who was trying to understand, whatever their current assumptions were, their current beliefs were, they always recognize that, hey, just because I believe it or just because I assume this doesn't make it true. And so my whole life is a constant holding of my beliefs out here a little bit and recognizing this is the current working hypothesis. But as soon as I encounter something that throws a little bit off, then that's an opportunity to learn more. And I shared that with him because that's how I think for any serious Christian, that's a bit of what your faith is. You're always trying to figure out, what go a little bit deeper. What does this mean for my life? How is my current understanding of God or of the universe not quite right, and how is that translating into how I live my life? Like it's a constant working hypothesis.
Yeah. One of my best friends through middle school and high school, he at the time he was involved with this New Age group, and we would talk all the time. Before homeroom in the morning is when we talked a lot, and we would get into really deep topics about our faith and what we were experiencing, our spirituality, and I would be very open and honest with him about what I was reading in Scripture. I wasn't saying it as if I was saying, this is the truth, you have to accept it. I was just like, this is what I'm experiencing. That's a huge part of evangelization. But I was listening to him as well, and it was a wrestling. It was a thinking through, and it wasn't just this is true. I don't want to hear what you have to say because what you're doing is not true. But really, talking and being open about it. What I want to talk to you about now is what got you into philosophy. What was the beginning of this journey of really getting into this process of thinking through thinking?
In my dad's testimony and the people that I met, I think I picked up a sense of always wanting to learn and to explore, a yearning to keep moving in truth. That it was, my knowledge was never a static and finished thing. Truth is truth, but my picture of it in my head is always imperfect. And so this desire to keep on moving and understanding and learning, I picked that up from them, I think, and it was impactful to me. Into my teen years, I liked being Catholic. The whole thing made sense. It looked good, made sense on paper. I did get to a time, especially as I looked ahead towards my future and my vocation, and at the same time as I was wrestling with a lot of personal teenage sin, just bad habits and just, that time of life where you're like, oh gosh, I have to be responsible for myself and my actions and my habits, and I could make some really dumb mistakes that could ruin my life. That was making me wrestle with, a lot of this I have accepted just because it's my family, but do I really, not questions about Catholic versus Protestant, but just of God at all, about the whole thing. I wanted to make sure the whole thing was true. And another thing that kind of sparked it for me is precisely experiencing in the church both those people like my father and others, and experiencing those people in their story of like saints, people I wasn't experiencing bodily, but in their story, their witness, for whom this was all very real and impactful. What they believed mattered in their life. It changed the decisions they made, the way that they lived. And then lots of other people around me for whom it really didn't seem to do so. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's a little bit of projection, probably on my part, my teenage presumptuous part. There was probably a lot more to those people, many of those people's spiritual lives than I saw. But it seemed like for many people, the church was just this nice club that they went to. I remember somebody said to me once, what faith means is we're not really sure, but we believe this and we hold to it, and we'll know for sure when we die and I was like, that's not what I didn't sign on for that. That's not what my dad's relationship with the Lord seems like. That's not what the saints seem to experience. I wanted to understand, what do we mean by putting faith in Christ? Does faith simply mean I don't know and I just decide I'm going to believe X and I'll find out when I die? Is that what faith really means?
Is it just that simple leap of faith that we just take and not really think about?
It's caricatures in the culture, or is there something more to it? And it may not be. There may be something more to it that, again, is still rather mysterious. But is it simply that, or is there something more? When the church proposes to us that we do come to know and experience the Lord in an ever deeper way in prayer and in the providential guidance of our lives and all that, is that what I should be expecting, or am I expecting too much? Is that is that the piety, and is the blind faith of the people around me, is that more the reality? And I wanted to know that, because I didn't find that terribly attractive. So that set me off on a course of digging into stuff that I hadn't dug into before, really digging into, the philosophical questions about, how do we, it doesn't seem to me to be precisely a point of faith of whether we know that God exists. I think that that's something throughout history, on the one hand, that Christians have had a certain amount of faith in, but on the other hand, made no bones about. This is something we can come to know reasonably. And you can't necessarily come to know Jesus as a person strictly through reason, just like I can't come to know another person in terms of a relationship strictly through reason, through having a dossier of their data. But you can come to know about them, that they exist. You can come to know a lot of things about the universe simply by reasoning and examining, and that's a lot of what philosophy is. And that was the part that I was digging into for the first time. And so in some of my academic study, in my conversations with other people, a lot of my thought and searching for a number of years was into the philosophy of what is the nature of the universe? What is the nature of reality? What's the nature of thought and reasoning? What does God exist? Does the universe make sense without God? What would it mean for the universe not to have a God? What would it mean for a universe that just seems to always have been? Is that not just a replacement for God if the universe is sort of this eternal thing that just exists for no reason? And then, questions more close to the faith itself. Precisely what does the church mean by faith? I really appreciated the Catechism. I finally got into it. The Catechism of the Catholic Church. Whatever someone might think of it from the outside, it is it is the treasure, the product of intense thought for 2,000 years, not by people who were shying away from truth and hard questions, by people who, I guarantee you, they were more boldly and courageously challenging and exploring the questions than you or I ever have or will. And this is the product of that. And it doesn't open and shut the door for you. It invites you into greater questioning. And so some of the language I found in there about faith, what faith means, faith is man's response to God, about this interplay of God's grace in our act in striving to come to know Him and to imitate Christ. It was really good. And so the intellectual journey culminated in the end to in my university parish, spending lots of time in front of the Blessed Sacrament and kind of rediscovering the Lord in a more personal way. But it was kind of in the midst of this intellectual journey. And so then during and after that, then I've always retained this searching heart, this searching mind to want to understand and to know. And philosophy means love of wisdom, and so it's not just a body of knowledge. In fact, it's not even primarily a body of knowledge. It's more of a virtue. It's more of a way of being. And I picked that up and I've carried it with me, I think.
Yeah, what you're saying about the Catechism, it is such a well reasoned out book.
Yeah.
That was my own experience reading through the Catechism when I was looking into the Catholic Church, was that one, as an evangelical, there's nothing in it that I could disagree with.
Yeah.
But two, that here is a look at the faith that has so much more reason than I had ever experienced as an evangelical. Really looking deep, I had read through the first section, which goes through the creed, and the fact that there were 4 or 5 pages dedicated for every single line of the creed that had references back to church documents, references back to scripture, but really dug deep into every single line and what does this mean and how do we believe it and how do we understand it. So going from being interested in philosophy and wanting to learn more about philosophy to actually studying it as a master's program, what was your thoughts is precious.
What is it? Continents, nasty little thoughts is precious.
What were your thoughts as far as what am I going to do with this? In something more deeper, maybe even professionally, that you wanted to study it on that level?
Sure. Well, in my undergrad, I don't think I ever had. Well, why does one do philosophy, right? I'm going to become a professional philosopher, freelance for a philosopher,
philosopher for hire.
I didn't figure I was going to necessarily be writing books. I never really had an interest in academic philosophy. In other words, philosophy tightly constrained to an academic department, and I was going to make an academic career. I never figured that, but it was just clear to me as I got a taste of it that whatever college is for, unless I'm going to study the skills of a specific trade, it's about learning to think well and to express myself and to be a person who goes out and finds answers, and can and do something with the information. And so I started out I was doing some theater and doing some an English major, and I ended up just consolidating it all and focusing on philosophy. And again, before getting to that master's program, I took some awesome, interesting classes at Bowling Green State University, a couple kind of general critical thinking, logical thinking classes where I just had great conversations with fellow classmates. This Protestant gal that I had good conversations with, this atheist guy that I still get coffee with once in a while. One of the best classes I took was a class on the thought of Nietzsche, which, he's a crazy man, but crazy people are not irrational people. They're hyper rational, from their premises that they're starting with. And he was one for whom following his premises which, are a lot of the premises that have seeped into our thinking today, of kind of certainly an atheism and sort of nihilism, but taking those out to the logical conclusions. You have people who hold those in this sophomoric way these days in terms of what they've just picked up from reading on the internet, but they don't live them out. They don't think them through. They don't take them seriously. He was such a shocking writer because he really followed things to the logical conclusions. That was one of the coolest classes I took. I took a class on, the philosophy of the mind. What's the nature of the mind and thinking, and is the mind just a computer, and do we have free will and all that kind of stuff? And that was a challenging class. It came right at a time of when I was really wrestling with all that stuff. But I came out of it, really benefiting from the difficult, hard questions and thinking about, the nature of the human person. Later on, again, I was blessed to be able to work on my master's, not because I needed it for a profession. I was already blessed to be able to work with my father in the C.O.O network, but I just was still interested in. Everyone should be a philosopher, and everyone should do philosophy to try to satisfy their own curious questions about the universe. I had a professor who really impressed that upon us. That should be your drivers. That you should have real questions that you want to answer, not because you want to write a paper to impress somebody, or not because you want to get a job, but you should be in touch with the own aspects of your being in the universe that bug you a little bit, and you should be trying to answer those, not to someone else's satisfaction, because you can't always do that, but to your own satisfaction. You should be working those through and getting to the bottom of them, to the place where you're at least satisfied with kind of how you've understood them. And so I was doing that. I had questions about virtue. I had questions about art. I've always been really interested in the nature of art and the aesthetic experience that I was interested in studying. And so I got all the way through my classwork. I've never written my paper. Hopefully I'll get back to it someday. But
if you think that JonMarc should finish his paper,
then come and babysit my kids, and I'll I'll get to work on it. I'll go sit in the corner and read.
Put your email in the comments, and we'll start setting up a babysitting
train. Yeah, gosh.
Well, there are a number of questions and thoughts that I have that we're going to delve into deeper next week, because we're going to delve deeper into what is philosophy, why is it important. But I just think it's really interesting then that you decided that this is so important that I want to do a master's about it. Do you think that there's something that you will end up using that more for, other than outside of just really being able to do philosophy in your everyday life?
Well, I think that is what I do, and that's what I'll continue to do. And so, it comes out everywhere because it's just been one continual thought process and exploration and refinement of not just you don't just go out there and explore ideas like you would watch a documentary. Oh, that was really interesting. But you're learning stuff because you're actually wrestling with the questions, and then then you're refining those in conversation, and then that's changing how you talk about things or how you explain things. Conversations with my wife, conversations with my kids that are now of ages where I'm trying to explain more difficult things to them about the world and the universe. I'm blessed to do, some of these kinds of things, media things, interview type things. I have a show with the Coming Home Network where we talk about different aspects of the spiritual life, and it's not strictly philosophical, but it all really is, because it's trying to understand things as they are. A love of wisdom. That's what philosophy means, a love of wisdom. And wisdom doesn't just mean simply data, processing data. It's looking at data and stepping back and trying to get the point. That's what a computer can never do. A computer can process and map a lot of data, but it can't stand back and understand, to stand under and get the point of the thing, to see the meaning of the thing. That's what we as rational beings can uniquely do. And so that comes into every conversation, and
and that makes me think of a few weeks ago we had on Adam Schroeder, who works in engineering and robotics, and we had a really interesting conversation about machine learning, how machines learn compared to how we learn, and it makes me think of one of the things we talked about was the process right now that we are going through of more and more acceptance and looking into and seeing how we can use automated systems like driverless cars. One of the processes in figuring out how cars can drive themselves is what do you do in a situation where, a bike comes out into the road.
Right.
And so in that area, you have the, a real life situation of, what do we do in this situation? Do we brake? Do we turn this way or that way? In philosophy, you have the trolley problem, which is a much more of a thoughtful situation that is, in a way, it's the same. And as you said, what a machine can never do is say, well, why? Or a machine can't give purpose or meaning to one thing or another.
Right.
It can just calculate, probabilities.
Yeah, machines can in some certain sense, machines can do science. We're going to talk a lot about this next time, I think, but it can do science, but it can't do philosophy. There really is a qualitative difference between the kinds of questions. It can look for patterns, and it can follow its instructions on how to act on those patterns, et cetera. But again, it can't answer the question of why the heck are we doing this in the first place? Should this be done? What are we working towards?
Yeah.
If we've identified a good end, well, what does it mean for it to be a good end? Why not a bad end? We take these things for granted, but it's always there. And the problem is with unexamined assumptions is when they're not serving us well, unless we're examining them, we don't know how to do differently than we've always done.
Yeah. And I don't think we want a smart car to be going down the road and then say, well, I could continue going and hit this one person and they're just a construction worker. Or I could veer off to the left, but I'd be hitting, the president. And so I give much more value to the president. So I'm going to keep going straight. We don't want our machines to be making those kinds of value judgments.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and which they will, because that's following instructions. In some sense, a machine can be a utilitarian. If a machine has perfect access to our criteria of what pain and pleasure are, what relative values might be, we can program those in, and we can have a machine that will carry out the utilitarian calculus for us. But it can't answer whether the utilitarian calculus is a moral thing to do in the first place, or whether the values we've plugged into it, programmed into it, are the right values or they're in the right hierarchy. That's the kind of questions that only we can ponder and answer.
Yeah, well, I'm sure, as you said, we're going to go deeper into that next time. But to end off,
yes,
this is always the first or the last question of the first episode with the guest. Other than philosophy, what are a couple of things that you really enjoy nerding out about?
Yeah, I laughed because you had this on the outline. And of course, my first thought was precisely, but what do you mean by nerd? That's one of my things to nerd out about is precisely looking at bits of language that are so common to us. Old phrases and words and really trying to understand what do they mean? How do we use them? What do they mean? What did they used to mean? Where did they come from? And what I find so interesting even about this program or about that question is what does it mean to when we say a nerd or to nerd out about something, what does it mean? And what came to mind is oftentimes, in pop culture, nerd and being a nerd and being cool are often counterposed, right?
You think about the movie series, The Revenge of the Nerds.
Right. So what do those mean, right? What does it mean to nerd out about something? And so on the other extreme, Coolness, I've always found it fascinating. One of my favorite comic strips, Calvin and Hobbes, there's a comic strip where Calvin is being cool. He's leaning against the wall, his arms crossed. He's got sunglasses on. He's like, that's how you know I'm cool. I got sunglasses on. And Hobbes is questioning, what does it mean to be cool? And Calvin says, cool means that the world bores you. And I was really impacted by that because I was like, that's right? When we say someone's cool, we think of the Fonz, on that old show. We mean someone who is unaffected by the world. Yeah. Whereas you or I might see a beautiful painting and be like, oh, that's a beautiful painting. He's like, whatever. That's what coolness is, at least in some sense. I mean, these words are used, in a wide range, but it seems like the essence is someone who is cool, not literally temperaturely cool, but figuratively cool to the world. They are not impassioned. They're not inflamed by the world or by things around them. They're cool. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, what does it mean to be a nerd? Mm-hmm. Well, it seems to me what we mean by someone who's a nerd is that, at least in regards to some area of life, some aspect, some thing, some phenomenon, they are decidedly not cool. In other words, they are very affected by it. They have allowed themselves, like, this is so cool. This thing is so interesting, so fascinating, that they've completely lost their cool about it. Yeah. And they don't really care about that fact anymore. I don't care who knows it.
And as we were talking in preparation, thinking about the person that loves comic books so much that they don't care if people stare at them and give them weird looks because they're walking down the street in a superhero costume.
Right. I mean, one description of the opposite of love is indifference, right? Mm-hmm. That's kind of what coolness is, right?
Yeah.
So being a nerd, in some sense, is being someone who loves a certain thing. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not cool. I'm a lover. Like when it comes to my wife, I'm not cool.
Yeah.
Like, no, I'm head over heels in love with her. I'm not cool about my kids. I love them. And so, with that in mind, what are some other things that I love? Man, so I love the literature of Tolkien and J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis and G.K. Chesterton. Those are kind of my three guys. I just love their writing, their thinking, both on the fiction side, the poetic fiction writing side, as well as just their practical philosophical thought. I love those guys, man. Teresa and I like to buy and smell literature-themed candles. That's been our Christmas gifts back and forth the past couple of years. We have this whole big basket, and David, he's on this kick lately where whenever Father Peter, my brother, comes to town, there was one time he was in town and he brought down the thing of candles and he was smelling them, and David started smelling each one, and he just was like obsessed with smelling these candles. And so now every time Peter comes, he's like, he's like trying to get the candles down. So those are kind of cool. We like coffee. It's something we share. I got into coffee about, I drank coffee for a long time, but about 10 years ago, I really started paying attention to like how I made it. And I watched a bunch of videos and I noticed that, if you get fresher coffee and you grind it yourself, it tastes very different. And actually, I noticed I would feel very different if I was having old stale gas station coffee versus like some nice fresh beans that I'd kept in a canister. So
and JonMarc and his wife Teresa do a show on Awaken Catholic. And last year I was on with them and we were talking about that very topic.
Yes, exactly.
About being a connoisseur. Yeah. And I think we're going to do another one at some point looking at, how does that bridge over from being a connoisseur to being a nerd, get more into that. But talking about what does it mean to really get into something.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this is Nerdy Catholic, right?
Yeah.
I think that coolness could be a virtue or a vice. As with most things, there's a thread of truth there where, like, we imagine a great saint going to face martyrdom. There's a certain coolness there in the sense of there's a decision to be unaffected by danger or by threat of a merely death of this mortal life, because you have your eyes on something greater, your integrity, your honesty, speaking the truth, holding on to what you know is true, even in the face of threat. There's a coolness there. One of these guys, I thought it was JP2, was Chesterton. A lot of the great saints and thinkers, there's a coolness to them, but it's in response to the right thing. In response to God, in response to our neighbor, we shouldn't be cool. We should be deeply affected by them. And so, thinking of the virtues and vices around coolness and nerdiness is interesting.
Yeah, and JonMarc and I are in a men's group together, and I think that is something also that is really important to make that it's important in your life. The fact that we can meet every week, pray together, wrestle with life, with what is the meaning of our faith in our life together.
Yeah. You should probably play it more cool regarding like politics and news headlines. Like, whatever.
Yeah.
But for the people and things that are close to you that really are important, we should be lovers.
Yeah. Well, be sure to come back next week. We're going to be talking much more about philosophy. What is philosophy and why is it important? We're going to look at a little bit into the history of philosophy and looking at how do we do it in our everyday life. So come back for that. I want to thank you for joining us on today's Nerding Out with That Nerdy Catholic. If you want to support this channel, head over to Nerdy Catholic Tees. Pick up, I got my Ohio Rosary shirt. I think there may be 13 or so states that are represented there right now. If you come from a state that's not represented and you want to have your own Rosary shirt of that state, just let me know. And pick up your own nerdy Catholic merch. Show off your nerdiness and your Catholicness at the same time. So, JonMarc.
Brother.
Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next week.
Sounds good.
See you next week. Bye.
System shut down.